All right, welcome to another great purchase contract training. I'm broker Kelvin Chang, looking to hopefully really just enhance your understanding of the purchase contract. Today, we're going to be covering the purchase contract, filling it out, and some of the protection terms in here that are going to really help enable us to be a better consultant to our clients. So I hope you're in for a nice treat. And I just wanted to maybe see and use an actual real life example on writing an offer. From a buyer's agent perspective, if you have a client, and I'm going to go ahead and pick this nice, beautiful remodeled listing in Glendora that's currently priced at 845,000. So we can go through the photos and we can see a beautiful remodeling, a new flooring, and we can see some of the cool things. It has a pool house, a nice, completely paved deck. But right off the bat, I can tell you a lot of cool stuff about this property just at first glance. So it's in a nice Glendora area, Glendora schools, and it's 4 bedrooms, 2.5 baths with over 2,000 square feet, with a pretty good lot, 8,600 square foot lot size, 3 car garage attached, built in 1977. So this property has been on and off the market for the past 179 days. And just recently, I guess they had some price changes or whatnot. But at this point now, it's priced to sell. So what do we do when we represent a buyer? Obviously, first thing you're going to do is walk them through a property, schedule an appointment, follow the showing instructions, make sure the buyer likes the home. And you as a buyer's agent are going to walk them through the doors and just don't point them in the oh, this is the living room, this is the kitchen. Try to embellish some of the features or things that you think are good selling points. And it's okay to share some of the negative things too. But I like what they did here. It's an open floor plan. It's has a nice remodeled look. It looks great from the photos. Um, and it looks like a very nice move-in ready turnkey home. So when we talk through the property, you go through it, they ask you questions, you be helpful, or you write down the questions that you don't know and you say, I'll find them out. Let me call the listing agent and I'll get, let me know all the questions you have. I'll find out, and they might say stuff like, what's the age of the roof, or what kind of plumbing does it have, or when was it remodeled, or, stuff like that. So I can't tell you all the questions because who knows what there's millions of questions that they could be asking. But at the end of the day, your client says, I like this property. Let's buy this. Can we write an offer for $840,000, Kelvin? And I'll be like, great, let's do that. Let me see what we can do if we can get this, negotiate this price and terms. Don't forget, terms are also important, not necessarily price. So when we fill out the offer, we want to always maybe gather some details, find a way to package this to make it mutual, and obviously find and call the listing agent to see if we can gather any information. Correct? So at this point now, my client tells me they want to write 840. We're going to write up an offer and they want certain other requests or this and this and that. We, as the buyer's agent, it's so easy to write an offer. I want to just show you how easy it is. I take this MLS number, copy and paste it. Okay. Then I'm going to go into my MLS and log into my car zip forms. And once I log in, it's going to pop up a screen. So I'm going to stop sharing and then reshare my new screen. Okay, so let me start sharing with you what my screen looks like now. And hopefully you guys can see my zip logics pulling up. And in here, all I need to do as a buyer's agent is create a new transaction. And I'm going to create a new purchase offer, type in the property, which is, I just write this, it's on Gladstone, residential property, and use this button right here called MLS Connect, because it'll pre-populate all of the stuff that's inserted into MLS, such as the address, APN number, the listing agent's information, and brokerages. So it'll do a lot of this stuff for you so that you don't have to waste a lot of time filling out an offer, especially if you create a template. But I'm not going to create a template for you right now. So as I get into my new transaction, and hopefully you guys can see this, I'm going to go ahead and pull up the purchase agreement. So I bring my sidebar menu down. Right up on the top, they already put the most common two forms, which is the listing agreement and the purchase agreement right here for me to go ahead and begin working on it. So as I pull up the purchase contract, I'll just show you the old version because this is most common, and everyone knows this version, right? So this is the one we're going to go by, and I'll share with you that they automatically attach the required necessary forms per California Civil Code to attach with any residential 1 to 4 unit property, all the basics, the essentials. So let's say I have two buyers and it's a couple, and I'll just call one buyer Bob and I'll call it buyer Susan. And we would fill in our information here, which is Coldwell Banker. And I'll put in my information as the broker. And I put in my license number, as well as my company license number. And we're done with page one. I'll also explain a little bit about the details of what this is. An agency disclosure is required. Anytime a buyer or seller, when you engage with a client, you want to let them know that there's duties, a disclosure, what a seller's agent must do and what a buyer's agent must do, and their duties that they do in representing a buyer. So we typically have a fiduciary duty of utmost care, integrity, honesty, and loyalty when we deal with this buyer. We're going to be transparent. We're not going to lie. Basically, we're going to treat them like if they're our family member, right? So we're going to diligent exercise of skill and care while we perform our duties, while we negotiate the contract, while we have honest and fair dealings in good faith. And that's good faith means we're going to try to accomplish their goals, their buying goals, and we also have a duty to disclose all material facts known to the property, known by the agent, whether they impact the value or desirability positively or negatively. We have a duty to share anything we know or can see and observe at the time of maybe walking the property, while we engage with them on the phone. Throughout the entire transaction, we have this fiduciary duty. And it tells you what a dual agent has to do and some responsibilities of the buyer or this client. Okay. So they also state a buyer should strongly consider obtaining tax advice for the federal and state consequences whenever they do, because we are not accountants. And you may get more disclosures, and the law requires agents to have a relationship with the client in which we do our duties and give real estate consultations, but we also don't give them legal advice as well. So there's a lot of cool, important caveats because we are often, as agents, taking on too much duties or making too many claims that we may or may not truly know. So if legal or tax advice is desired, consult a competent professional who's licensed in that section. That's kind of given, right? Then they have all these professional codes and duties. I'm not going to go through that paper. Recently, this fair housing and discriminatory advisory just kind of says that we as a company in California do practice fair housing and respect all of the laws regarding against discrimination and protected classes. Okay, so the federal fair housing has a difference with California, but essentially there are protected classes, and these are all of the protected classes that we do not use as a reason or excuse to deny the business, deny them the opportunity to buy or sell. So we cannot use this in any of our marketing. Anything that discusses race, color, ancestry, national origin, religion, age, sex or orientation, gender, marital status, family status, citizenship, immigration status. All this stuff is all stuff that we treat everyone equally, fairly, and none of these, whether they're religion or whether they have a medical condition, should be used against them. Makes sense, right? So, because of that, who is required? We as brokers and agents, yes, we are required. Even landlords must comply. They cannot use the excuse, oh, you have a large family that's I don't want to see you and your parents and your in-laws, and you have basically 8 people living in here. The number of people could be used, but not necessarily because, oh, it's because you have a family. You If the landlord discriminates and, oh, I don't like the language they speak, I don't like the that they're handicapped, what if they scratch my floors? You cannot use handicap as a excuse to deny someone application to rent. That's just common sense, right? So that's why we have this reminder in every single transaction, because there are some people who choose to discriminate, and that's out of our control. But we have to advise, they sign off on this, and both parties have to respect federal law. Then there's an opportunity of the PRBS where maybe a buyer or a seller might have dual agency situations. Or let's say I represent Bob and Susan on the purchase of the contract. I also could be, I think this is a great deal. I could be having another buyer also writing an offer on the same property that is that you don't know. It is allowed for me to bring this property to more than one buyer or seller and hopefully get them to buy and write an offer. That's what that page explains. Whenever you have a lot of money being transferred, there is an advisory here, the wire fraud, electronic funds. Double check always that if you're going to wire or transfer funds, you call the escrow officer and you find exactly confirmed the routing and deposit bank account number. It's just an extra layer of defense that the buyer has been warned and advised, double check before you send out any money. Now we get into the purchase contract. Now, this is mostly recently revised back in December last month. So today is January 31st. I'm going to go ahead and use that as my date prepare date. They also use this as called a reference date. So this is now known as the RPA dated January 31st, 2023, where my client, buyer Bob and buyer Susan, wish to write an offer for this Glendora property. Okay. And this is listed by Coldwell Banker Dynasty, and I'm representing the buyer. In this situation, it's because this is our listing, we would actually be checking a dual agency situation. Okay, you can see the broker numbers match. I'm using this as an example. If you were writing an offer that's listed by another brokerage, it would be you're representing the buyer exclusively here. If I have to write an offer, my client told me they want to write $840,000. Okay, that's the purchase price. Every term that's in orange, yellow, this is called a negotiable field. There's no required or mandatory must. Everything could be mutually negotiated out. Okay, so that's why some things are fixed and you can't change the language in black. But the orange field allows us to write in the terms or fill in the areas that we need to propose. We're proposing a 30 days common escrow that's usually sufficient for a lender to get the whole process completed and for the buyer to conduct their investigations. I usually leave the expiration 3 calendar days alone. So I don't want to unless I have a situation where I have another offer I'm working on, I could put like a 1-day expiration if I needed to. Most people ask me, oh, can I have an initial deposit of less than 3%? Let's talk about that real quick. Normally, 3%, let's just say it's $30,000, less than that, let's say 25,000. Normally 3,000 is 3% is customary because this is the maximum a buyer could lose under liquidated damages. That's just the whole purpose if they breach the contract or fail to close the escrow as per proposed. The buyer is the one proposing this. So the buyer needs to double check with their lender and double check with their time frames and their schedule on their holiday schedule, for example, what they are going to propose. Because you could fill in, if I'm going on holiday for 2 weeks, I can propose a 45-day escrow if I need it. Okay. Sellers might not like it, but you should propose what they're willing to do and they should stick to whatever's the agreed agreement. This is the good faith that they put into an escrow to secure the transaction, to secure the property, and to kind of just put a good faith deposit. Can this dollar amount be smaller? Absolutely, yes. You could open an escrow for $1,000. You can even open it up for $100 if you wanted to. The problem with the seller is there's not much at risk. So even if you have the period of time goes by and your buyer removes all contingencies, they're really only exposed to the maximum amount of what is held in escrow. And that kind of is the limit. If there's only $100 in escrow, there's not much exposure at all. So even if the buyer fails to perform, breaches the contract, they're not losing a lot of money. But if they're putting 3%, there's a significant amount of money that any person buyer does not want to lose. So this kind of just the balancing point is trying to get to a point where there is good faith, there is some at risk, there is something to get the parties to perform to the contract, but there's no set requirement whether it has to be $1 or whether it has to be $1 million. Okay, you could open escrow with the full purchase price as good faith, $840,000 if you wanted to put that as a deposit. If by default your buyer is doing a conventional loan, which a majority of the buyers are, then they're going to use a conventional, you don't have to check anything. If they're doing a FHA loan, you check this box. If they're doing seller financing or a VA loan or maybe private financing, you could write that down here. Let's say my client is an independent contractor. They may not qualify for conventional, but maybe they can get private financing via maybe, a private lender, and they have different types of programs available, like a 24-month bank statement program, or they can use a verification of employment program or a stated income program. Every lender can set their own guidelines on how they want to broker their mortgages. So sometimes they might be able to get private financing when they don't qualify for conventional. And private financing dictates the terms, but typically they're higher interest rates and or may include points to the transaction that conventional does not charge. It's all up to the lender, but the private financing also could be my relative and my uncle from my sister's cousin's uncle. It doesn't have to be a related party, but let's just say my uncle, cousin or whatever decides they want to lend me $500,000. They could lend it to me at 0% interest rate. They could lend it to me at 10% interest rate. It does not matter to the seller. Whatever my agreement with my lender or my relative or my, rich uncle, it could be negotiated out too. Okay. He could charge me 0 points, 1 point, 20 points. It's up to us and our agreement. Okay. What does this do? Well, typically, most people are going for an 80% program where they get 80% financing of 840. Doing the math really quick, that becomes a loan amount of $672,000. Okay. The buyer, there are programs of 10% conventional, 10% down. There are programs where you can even put in more, like 50% down, 50% financing. That's all up to what your client does. But what I do recommend, because this year 2023 is a very volatile year for interest rates, including last year as well. It is a good idea to put a financing cap. Maybe the maximum a buyer is willing to pay is 1 point, and the rate shouldn't exceed, let's say, 6.5% interest rate. Currently, the market rates right now is between 6 and 6.5. So this is in that cushion of today's rates. But if I do get financing at 7%, this gives me an ability to escape the transaction, use financing terms as a valid reason to cancel the transaction in the event the only loan offered to me is 7% with 2 points. I have the ability to cancel the transaction if I want to. Any questions? Usually this field is blank unless you're getting additional financing. Sometimes you might be getting, oh, I might be getting conventional for the first, and I might be getting a second mortgage from my bank or from my cousin relative or from another party. It is possible to get 2 loans on the property at the same time. When have I used this before? I used it once with the city of Baldwin Park. So my client got a first loan, an FHA loan, and then the second loan during that time, Baldwin Park was offering 10% towards the buyer's down payment if they use it as their primary residence. This was a program for Baldwin Park tenants, and that client qualified. Their income qualified, they were tenants, and they helped them with the down payment of 10%. And after living there for 7 full years as their primary residence, the city of Baldwin Park would eliminate the lien with no cost, no interest rates. They would basically write it off. So that 10% is forgiven. Actually, this is about the 7-year mark when this. So I should probably follow up with my client to get a deed of reconveyance. So anyway, that's where the second lien goes. If they were purchasing as a primary residence, it's automatically checked. But if this is a secondary home, like a vacation home in Big Bear, maybe I would write it here and check the box. This still qualifies them for owner user rates. But if I check this box here under investment property, that means it tells the lender, because the lender gets a copy of the contract, it tells the lender that this is going to go for investors' rates when it's an investment property, which is typically a 0.5% higher than conventional fixed rates for a primary residence, give or take. But usually that's a rule of thumb. Okay? But my clients, Bob and Susan, they're buying this for their primary home. They would have to pay $167,900 as the balance of their down payment on top of their original I'm going to put their initial deposit to be $25,000. Okay, so that brings the balance of 143,000 plus 25. That comes out to 20% total. There's still going to be closing costs on top of this. I've seen seller credits today, now in today's age, where buyers are asking for seller credits, if any. Sometimes they say, oh, to help with my closing costs, I need $5,000. And this could be done. You can ask the seller to credit $5,000 to help with the buyer's recurring and non-recurring closing costs. Okay? Or maybe I can say it's to be credited to pay off solar lien. Okay? So there are things that you could do in here in terms of seller credits, if any, or termite expenses or this and that. But at the end of the day, yes, this is now leaning towards a buyer's market in 2023. So I'd say it's not that outrageous for you to ask for seller credits. Or what's very common today is called the 3-2-1 buy down program. Some people ask, what is a 3-2-1 buy down program? I'm going to talk about it because it hasn't been discussed in my prior classes. But so I'll give you an example.
Kelvin, after you talk about this, I have a question. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm showing you just thank you, Jane, no problem. A 3-2-1 buy down mortgage is all basically saying in years 3, 2, and 1, the first 2 years will be at a reduced interest rate. Okay. Many listings that are unsold, some builders and sellers are offering to help make this mortgage more reasonable in terms of the monthly payments. And all they do is reduce the interest rates in the first 1 and 2 years. Okay. So what this really means is the first year 1 and year 2, they pay a lower interest rate for the first 3 years for an upfront payment, sometimes paid by the buyer, sometimes paid by the seller. And the interest rate is reduced by 3% in the first year, 2% in the second year, and 1% in the third year. So a 5% mortgage would just charge a 2% financing in year 1, and in month 13, they will have a 3% interest rate, and then year 3, there would be a 4% interest rate, and then in year 4 and beyond, year 4 to year 30, they would be charged at the standard 5% rate. This is a viable program because when it comes to qualifying for a mortgage, sometimes it boils down to the payment. And the payments under the 3-2-1 might work for the buyer's current DTI, debt to income, or their loan to value ratios. So if this is a strategy solution, maybe this is a great program for them. Secondly, let me remind you, they can always refinance. So because the points and interest is already paid up front, maybe the seller pays $10,000 towards the 3-2-1 buy down program. The seller pays $10,000 to bring down this points to become to the buyer's level of qualifications and ability to purchase. Great. The seller gets their cash. They've paid $10,000 towards their closing costs or towards the buy down program, and the buyer gets the property. They get the lower payments, and hopefully within the next 3 or 4 years, as the rates become more market normal, maybe in 3 years, the rates actually fall below 5%. Maybe it's 4% in that time period. Maybe I schedule what's called a refinance using my same monthly income, maybe my same qualifications. Now I qualify for a conventional 30-year fixed mortgage at a 4% rate. That may happen in 3 years from now. So I can just pay off this buy down and refinance and restructure my debt to the best prevailing rates. Maybe it's even below 4% because we were in the 2.6 to 2.7% range for a good year during 2020, 2021. That was very historically low. So I don't expect it to happen in the near future. But again, we never know when another pandemic or when money becomes more affordable and banks are more, and the Fed government is a little bit more liberal with their requirements with banks. Any questions right now, Jean?
Yes. Okay. On that one, on the first column, and then they say seller have to credit the how much for the buy down, right? And on the second one, and then they say and mention about to have another closing cost. Is it that is the 5.1 and 5.2? Okay. G1 and G2 is the same additional financial term.
No. G2 is where you want to write anything related to finance here. G1 is only if you're going to do a credit to the buyer. Okay. This is not where you're going to put the 3-2-1 buy down program. No.
I understand.
G2 only is for buyers recurring, non-recurring closing costs where the seller is giving this credit. Most of the time, you're going to write your offer at 0, normally, nothing.
Yeah, but if they write on the G2 and then when I counter, I only say the seller only credit for 25,000. So that means I write down for the G2 is deleted. It's not the seller won't do anything, right? That is the different term for the credit, right?
This is an absolute different term. So
Oh,
finance terms here, it
Uh-huh.
could be a million different things.
Uh-huh.
I sometimes may write something like this. Okay.
Uh-huh.
This I'll write a few common terms. Buyer reserves the right to add spouse relative as a co-signer for
Oh,
financing purposes.
I see.
Okay.
Got it.
Or
Yeah.
buyer reserves right
Mm-hmm.
to assign to own family trust during
Mm-hmm.
escrow period. Okay.
Okay.
I can write
Yeah.
an assignment or a co-signer under here.
Mm-hmm.
That's just one example. I could
Yep.
write seller to provide seller financing up to 10% of the CSFA addendum attached. Here's another
Got
example
it.
where I
Yeah.
get the seller to help me 10% of the purchase price, and I attach my addendum and I write down for them to remind them to look at my addendum.
Yeah.
I could
Okay.
ask
I just
seller to pay $10,000 towards buyer's 3-2-1 buy down program. See attached letter from lender for details.
yeah.
Okay.
Got it. Yeah.
I can
Thank
write
you.
anything in here. This becomes incorporated into the contract and is a great way to slide some terms in to you that favor your client that they hopefully or may not see. Sometimes the seller only looks at price and then they
Yeah.
don't realize
Uh-huh.
that they have to pay $50,000 just like that towards a
Yep.
3-2-1 program. They say, "Oh, I got my price. Cool. Let's sign the offer." And then
Uh-huh.
I have seen agents not look here. I've seen them overlook it, and now it's become part of the contract.
Yeah.
So
It's
I
very
love, I love this area, being able to fill in whatever I want, and maybe it's not my job to explain it to their client or the seller.
yeah. Got
It's my
it.
job
Thank
to
you.
explain it to the listing agent. I'll be happy to say, "Oh, we need this because the program is qualifications, this and that, whatever." I can explain it when they ask me. But anyway, that's where you would put any of these special terms here. Another finance term. I mean, you can add a per diem in here if you wanted to, where if you know there's different things that could be adjusted. Okay. I could also say seller to pay off the seller to pay off solar lease. Okay. So anyway, that's just where the section is right now. I'm just giving it and leaving it blank. All right. Now, never have to fill this out here. This is really only if you have a buyer broker agreement and commissions. This is very rare. So you're probably not going to need this. You're better off whenever you want to confirm your commission, you would use form CBC and attach this with your offer email. Cooperating broker compensation. Now, verification of all cash or sufficient closing funds. Normally it's attached to the offer by default, but maybe I have a client who says, I don't want to show my proof of funds until they accept me. Then you could just put like, oh, okay, after 1 day after acceptance, I'll give you my closing costs and down payment confirmation. That's up to you. You can check these boxes here. It is very customary to give their pre-approval letter or hopefully a DU approval when you write your offer. So it's good practice to include it. It is good practice to show your proof of funds of 143 plus the EMD with your offer, because that's showing that you have good faith. It's showing you have the money, and maybe you just block out the account numbers and some of the sensitive data. you could black that out. When you want to remove contingencies, it would be checking these boxes, but we don't ever recommend to remove contingencies up front, especially during a buyer's market. We probably not a need to. And then you could write a minimum appraisal amount if you want to have a top line cap. By default, you get 17 days to do your loan and appraisal contingencies, which protects your deposit. You also have 17 days to access the property and do due diligence. So everything is right now defaulted 17 days. I commonly just leave it the same. I don't really need to change it because 17 days is definitely sufficient time for me to get my buyer going, unless they have a complicated background, or if they're buying and they need to set up a trust in order to buy it, or set up an entity like a partnership or an LLC, and then they're going to close escrow under that entity. That's another reason. Or if they have a very complex tax situation where they're a business owner. Sometimes business owners don't know, but they're going to buy a property. Then the lender's going to find out that they own a business that has debt. And then they're going to ask for the financials of the company and the tax returns of the company. And that could cause them to have another 2-3 week delay. So if you have special situations, you might need to ask for a longer loan contingency. By default, possession is delivered at time of recording. When the escrow officer says, congratulations, we've recorded the escrow and the escrow is now closed at 11 to 12 o'clock. That's usually the cutoff time for recording, 12 o'clock. Then you have a confirmation. That is when possession shall be fully delivered into the buyer. If you want it to be a specific time, oh, my sellers need, or I know the sellers are going to move out on that exact day and they need till 6 o'clock, then you could write that in here. Okay. So you could fill this part out as needed. But close of escrow shall be delivered vacant. So, or if you're going to say, oh, the seller needs 5 days to move out after close of escrow, you would click this box and say 5 days after close of escrow. And then they give them a 5-day license to stay on the property. And you can stipulate the terms inside this form called SIP. If you're going to happen to give the seller like 3 months after close of escrow or 30 days or any more, now they become a tenant. You have to give them a residential lease after sale form. It's very easy. All the instructions are right, kind of going to automatically populate for you. If you're going to buy the property that is occupied by a tenant, then you have to include this form TOP to show and have the language to address how the security deposit and the proration of rents and whether or not you're going to ask for a confirmation of the tenant's security and who owns what. So this needs to be added to the contract. It's good practice. Okay. Now, 7 days, the seller has to give you all delivery of their disclosures, documents, except for the HOA. The seller has to fill out and sign and return 5 days after delivery the escrow instructions back to the escrow holder. The seller has to order HOA docs within 3 days from acceptance. But like I said, sometimes some HOAs might take 10 business days before they return it back to you. So that may be a good valid reason to prolong your contingency period and not remove your contingencies as a buyer. And they also have 7 days to install smoke detector, carbon monoxide, and water heater bracing, because these will be checked by the appraiser, and you want the seller to have it done before the appraiser goes the first time. Make sense? Now, after this, here, there's 2 things suggested. This is called paragraph P19, where you as the buyer's agent got to double check the photos while you're there talking to the client. What are you going to ask for? And I strongly recommend you that if you're going to ask for the washer and dryer, dishwasher and microwave, all these special smart home equipment, brackets, whatever it is, you are going to ask for them to be included. Or if I wanted something special, I want the mirror in the bathroom. I also want the uh security system. Okay, that would be over here. I'm sorry. Right? I also want the sofa in the living room. And I have also gotten for my client, I've gotten them all pool, spa, outdoor furniture. So I did that for my client last year. I got him all the equipment plus the furniture and the all this stuff, and it was a nice umbrella. So whatever it is, you specify what's included, and double check excluded items in the MLS, because usually if there is something written in the MLS, sometimes they say seller wants to keep the chandelier, or sometimes the seller wants to keep the washer and dryer. Then I would say follow the MLS first. Don't request for something that the seller already upfront says they want it. But you can always try if you want to. I leave that up to you if it's in negotiations. Okay. This is now when we fill out who pays for what. And I'm going to fill this out as customary that I see in Los Angeles County. Typically, the seller will pay for the NHD report, and I'll just give them seller's choice. The buyer should pay for their home inspection report, and that's buyer's choice. I like to ask for termite upfront, so I might write in here termite section 1 clearance report, and I have the seller pay with seller's choice. Smoke detectors, the seller. If this is a city that has a government inspection, I would check these areas. Glendora does not, but El Monte, Pasadena does, and many other cities too, like LA. So if it's falling in those areas, I would check these boxes. Each pays their own, customarily pays the escrow fees. Because this is a buyer's market, I have the ability to negotiate the escrow officer that I like. So in my situation, I do like to work with Perfect Escrow. So I'm going to ask for this in my offers, because this is a buyer's market. Seller typically will pay for title insurance by seller's choice. And the buyer automatically has to pay for their own lender's title insurance policy. That's a given. Seller has to pay for city and county transfer taxes, customary. If there's an HOA, then you have the seller typically pay for it. Hold on 1 second. I need to plug in my laptop. Okay. And private transfer fees. If you don't know, you can always write. Sometimes there's private transfer fees in certain cities, like in city of Azusa. Because Rosedale community does have private transfer fees where every sale there's $1,000 given to the community. So that's a private transfer fee. So every if applicable, I write it as seller, if applicable. And then these are other fees or cost. This could be any fee or cost. Maybe I know that the property has really blatant defects, like structural or foundation issues. Then I want to make sure my client pays for foundation expense, foundation or structure, to hire a structural engineer. And I can say my buyer to pay for this because I want him to and make sure this is a contractual duty, because I don't want this buyer to buy this property without getting a quote, because it's already disclosed in the MLS that there's a maybe a blatant defect on the structural. So I could do that. Or maybe I want the seller to pay for a certain fee or cost, like the solar lease lien payoff. I want the property paid off in full, use the seller's proceeds, and negotiate to take away this to pay the solar lease. I could try to throw it in here, even though the seller doesn't know what the payoff is, $30,000. I actually contractually require the seller to pay it off in full. And when all the seller might be looking at is just the price right here that they got. Okay. So a lot of times clients, sellers, and agents overlook these small area here. It's a great way to slide some terms that favor your buyer. Seller will customary pay for a home warranty, not to exceed. They kind of raised the prices recently, but maybe I want to put a $700, depends on what it is. And I just say buyer's choice usually. And including, I could add in optional upgrades like a roof coverage or appliances, stuff like that. Up to you, pool. If my client already is writing a very low offer, maybe my buyer is a lowball offer, then maybe I should go ahead and just click the box the buyer will waive the home warranty plan, because they know that the buyer is going to remodel and gut the whole property anyways. You don't need a home warranty when you're going to gut the property. So you're just going to go ahead and waive it. This R is also a great area to slide in terms. This also is when you get to disclose things so that the parties can have transparency. What are some items that must be disclosed in California? Anybody know?
They write
Okay, maybe I have to say
TPS.
Elvin Chang is related to buyers. Is related to buyers. I have to disclose that relationship if it's my immediate family. Okay, here's one example. Or maybe I say maybe I am the buyer. I would disclose that I'm representing myself in this purchase, because the Department of Real Estate requires you to, and whenever you do transact, you have to disclose your licensee, that you have to disclose you have a license, right? But you could also slide in other terms in here that are very favorable to your client, like property must be delivered vacant prior to close of escrow as a condition of this offer. If seller fails to deliver vacant each day beyond the original, seller fails to deliver possession, seller to be charged a $200 daily per diem until full possession is delivered to buyer. In this statement, I'm asking, you told me your seller, your tenant would be out in 30 days. We're holding this escrow, and I'm already putting in language in here to protect my buyer, that I could also add, if buyer requires a rate lock extension due to seller's lack of performance, seller to pay rate lock fee. So this is a contractual term that if they can't get it done and I locked in for 45 days, and now we're at the 60-day mark and we need a rate lock of 45-day mark and then we need to extend, this technically puts it on the seller's expense, that the escrow officer has now written instructions from the parties for the seller to pay for this and deduct it, and a per diem. But if you don't do these things, then now you have to get someone to sign it. Why not sign such protective terms at the beginning when everyone's happiest and no problems are there? It's easiest to get this signed earlier, is all I'm telling you, and my advice to you as a broker. Because no one anticipates delays, but at the end of the day, things happen, tenants don't cooperate, situations sometimes don't go as planned. We know that in life. A lot of things go unplanned and unanticipated. So it's easiest to get these agreements in writing signed now. Okay. Then under the next page, there's not much else to fill out. We've done the entire purchase contract. These are when I want to add in any other disclosures or forms or addendums that are specific to the type of property, like tenant occupied property, I would check here. If it's a property with a septic tank, I would check here. If you have a short sale situation, you would check here. If you have a probate sale, you have to check here. If your seller is trying to do a 1031 exchange and they disclose it to you, then you check here. If your buyer's fulfilling and doing the up leg of fulfilling their last exchange, then the buyer would check here. If you're going to attach a form called other addendum, and I'm going to do seller financing addendum, I might want to throw it in here. Or if I'm going to create addendum number 1, I would actually throw it into here. And addendum number 1 might be something that I attach to this offer. And I have a bunch of terms that I want to list out. I could slide it in here. Okay. So if you have a trust, you click here. If you have a, and this is customary. I always have a statewide, but it's up to you. If you want to get it signed now or you want to get it signed later. But these are all standard disclosures. As you can see, we just filled out and finished the purchase contract in less than 40 minutes. Normally, I can get this done in 5 to 10 minutes. But because I'm explaining this to you, I'm really just trying to get you some ideas to think about how we can better understand and prepare our agreements. Everything else after this gives the details of what specific duties the buyer/seller should be doing. It talks about what's supposed to happen when you remove contingencies, when you have what's supposed to happen at closing and when you deliver possession. What's the condition of the property is supposed to be? It's supposed to be the same as when you originally offered. You're not supposed to remove fixtures. And you also should use the final walkthrough as a period of time to double check if any repairs that were requested and honored performed right. You can use it to check to see that the personal property has been removed. And you also verify the property because sometimes during the 30 days escrow period, there could be a storm or a major disaster or a mudslide. And I've seen this in the last 90 days. We've had a lot of rainstorms in which there were discovered new leaks. Okay. So stuff like that, it's important to do your final walkthrough. You never know when maybe someone broke in the glass door in the back and did some graffiti and vandalized the property. Maybe some things were stolen by the seller, and you have the opportunity during your final walkthrough to verify that they didn't take all the things that were originally checked off in this page right over here, this section. So you have a clear and title that's going to be delivered to the buyer. This talks about the appraisal and loan contingencies, and buyer has to remove contingencies in writing. And very important bold stuff in black is must be read or explained to your client. Make sure they read everything in dark because this is important that they understand. Read here, seller agent may not be aware of all defects. And so buyer must be responsible to conduct their own investigations of the entire property, not just the structure. You got to maybe look at walkways, look at the dirt. Maybe there's a big infestation of a bunch of peacocks in Arcadia that actually destroyed and created a nest. There's a lot of things. The fencing could be technically built on or beyond the property line. and it's not your job to tell where the lot line is exactly. They can hire a survey if they feel that the lot line is not proper. So there's stuff like that where the buyer has a whole 17 days to do all types of investigations. They don't just have to do a home inspection. Removal of your contingency basically puts your deposit at risk. If you cancel the transaction during your contingency period, you should be able to cancel and get your full refund of your EMD minus any escrow cancellation fees. But at the end of the day, we aim for, we don't want to just open an escrow and not have what's called bad faith. So, for example, I open escrow with my buyer and my buyer never comes to the property, never sends a home inspection out, never applies for a mortgage, and then suddenly in 17 days they say, okay, I'm gonna cancel. I just changed my mind. That's not good faith. The seller could have an argument that you've done nothing. You didn't even get an appraisal. You didn't get a loan done. You didn't come in at all. Therefore, you wrote this offer and wasted our time in bad faith. They could argue and have a claim towards your deposit, even if you didn't remove your contingency in writing. So you have to act in good faith. Make sense? Any questions? So items included in sale, it has brackets included that are attached to the wall. Who pays for what? This all specified here. And these are all the statutory disclosures that needs to be provided to a client, including the agent's duty to do an AVID. You have the duty to go to do material facts. But in one instance, as a broker, I'm in escrow right now. And I'll give you one example. Okay. I have an escrow open in San Francisco. So I'm at a property and I bought a property with my client on Market Street. So we're buying a property all cash, and my client understands that I am not able to go visit the property because I'm all the way here in Los Angeles. So what do? I relieve myself from that duty by disclosing that I have not visited the property, I've never stepped foot in there, and I also will not be visiting the property. So I've contractually taken myself out of that AVID requirement. Okay, so I'll try to show that to you. Let me just get it. It's stronger in my email. So in my instance, I'm buying a very beautiful property. It's a condominium right in the financial district of San Francisco. And I asked for a very kind request for repairs during our investigations. I want them to replace a laundry room outlet with GFCI, list of all utility companies, and include the microwave with the purchase price. No other requests from buyer. Thank you for your consideration. I gave him my home inspection report. The sellers honored our request because our request was very, very small. And I gave her all of this 286 pages. Guys, you think that we have a lot of paperwork in Los Angeles? Here is how you have to transact in San Francisco. Look at all of this documents that I'm dealing with. And there's more than almost 300 pages worth of documents just to do a transaction in San Francisco. Just to give you an idea how much more difficult it is, look at this. They have they have affiliated business disclosure. They have notices. This agent did the TDS. What did I write on my TDS, guys? Look at here. Due to distance, buyer's agent did not perform an AVID. Buyer's full consent and knowledge. But agent has never visited the property. Buyer shop buyers rely on owner. My buyer signed it. Fine. So I did no items for disclosure. In this situation here, the agent did an AVID, and I'm just giving you, look at the San Francisco disclosures. It looks like this, San Francisco seller disclosure. Are
We
you
can't
aware?
see. We cannot see. Your screen is freeze. Yeah.
Thank you, Jane, for letting me know.
Yeah.
So as you can see, there's 286 pages of this disclosure document to my buyer. And this is, they're still doing the TDS, yet they still do this extra seller disclosure,
Mm-hmm.
which is multiple pages.
Mm-hmm.
Then they have
Wow,
a San Francisco
286.
seller disclosure for condominiums and co-ops, which we have HOA. Then they have like all these extra, it's so redundant. And then they have all this extra stuff here where it says see disclosure. Oh my God, this is annoying. I'm referring back to another. It's okay. My clients are happy. And then they have another San Francisco seller disclosure. Then we have our statewide, which is normal. So I'll go by all the statewide.
Mm-hmm.
Then we have a buyer seller for San Francisco disclosure and disclaimers advisory. And this just
Oh
has
my goodness.
ordinance. This is like a statewide buyer seller, but it's only specific to San Francisco. So then this is a 20-page document, new construction, subterranean issues. PG&E has this property tax and assessments. Oh my God, doing San Francisco is so crazy. Code compliance, rent eviction. They do have rent control in San Francisco.
Yeah. Oh my
So there's
God.
20 pages of this that my client has to read. Safety inspections for decks and appendages, for blah, 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 blah. Anyway, so we signed it just a while ago. Parking and storage disclosure, wire fraud. This is normal. This is normal. Market conditions, normal. Okay, so these are all the statutory. Then we have a San Francisco adjacent to industrial use disclosure. Okay, so yes, this property is next to industrial areas and a flood map advisory because there's a lot of water up north. Square foot and lot size advisory because there's a discrepancy in the square footage, guys. Then there's a Fair Appraisal Act. Okay, that's fine. A receipt booklet for the earthquake disclosure. We got that. This is their San Francisco earthquake booklet. And then they have this Buyer Homeowners Association, confirmation of real estate agency, San Francisco addendum to the purchase agreement. So then I have the HOA stuff. So all this stuff, I don't mind. At least they're on top of it. I got all the HOA docs very early. So here's all the board of directors meetings, the minutes, the call to order. So they have the financials in here. And so I'm not going to go into all of those things. I'm just showing to you how much better we have it here in Los Angeles than in other areas. They have it better because their property values are higher. So it's a give or take. All right, that's pretty much the end of my training, unless you guys have any questions.
So far, no.
No?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I hope you guys learned a little bit about protecting your client through the contract, where to slide your terms in. And obviously, depending if you're a seller or buyer, if you're a seller's agent, you should read that contract, especially what has been changed and the spine print and addendums, because you got to make sure you're understanding, explaining things thoroughly to your client. If I'm a buyer's agent, try, negotiate, slide things in if you want, because it's not your duty to explain the whole thing to the seller. So it's okay to try, especially in the buyer's market. But if you tried the strategies I told you in today, in 2020 or 2021, when it was a seller's market, it's not going to work. You have to know what the climate is like in your area. So the best way to gauge what the climate is like is look at the active listing in that city and see if there's a lot of listings or not. If there's a lot of inventory, then buyers have leverage. If there's limited inventory, it's a seller's market. Okay. Hope this
Sure.
information was helpful. Any
Thank
questions?
you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Calvin.
Thanks,
Bye
Barbara.
bye.